You're listening to the Mission Makers Show, a podcast that inspires humans to get into the mindset of success. My name's Farah Nanji, and I'm the founder of a business in the motorsports industry that explores leadership lessons from things like Formula One. I'm also a DJ and music producer in the underground electronic scene, and a public speaker on key topics like resilience, building high-performance teams, overcoming learning difficulties, and stimulating creativity. And to tie it all together, I love writing thought-provoking content as a journalist for these industries which are so unique in themselves. On this show, I'm sitting down with some of the most inspiring and driven people I've met around the world to talk about their processes, their failures, the lessons they've learned, and how they are truly making an impact for this world. On today's episode, we're joined by one of the world's most accomplished and experienced sports marketers and sponsorship consultants, Tim Silvey. Tim's line of work has seen him manage accounts for some of the world's biggest companies across a number of sports, including Formula One and Formula E. And he recently launched his own web-based racing community called Motormouth, which has gone from strength to strength, so much so that they've got superstars like Mark Webber on their podcast. In this episode, we talk about the keys to securing sponsorship, the future of females in motorsport, and overcoming obstacles that are out of your control. Hey Tim, how are you?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. Having a good morning?
Yeah, not bad. Various Zoom phone calls where I seem to be living at the moment, but there you are. It's the way of the world.
Thanks for joining us today. Just wanted to kind of have a deep dive into what you do and how you discovered your passions in life. You've been really successful at what you do, and I think it's quite inspirational, particularly some of the experiences you've had with the sponsorship side of things. So should we just kind of dive in?
Let's do it.
Cool. All right, so I guess the first question then is, when did you really discover what you're passionate about in life?
I guess it goes back to, I think up until university, I had no idea, not a clue. And university, really, I only did for something to do because I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. And then I guess after uni, I came out and did, during university, actually, I did a gap year in the States. Not a gap year, it's one of those industry years where they send you off somewhere. And I chose to go to the States. I think out of the 300 or so in my year, there was only two or three of us that decided to go abroad. So I went to Orlando and did a year working with Universal in Orlando. And that really opened my eyes to work, making money. And I guess I found a passion then for work, not schoolwork. I'd always struggled with schoolwork and education and the education system, and I totally get the value in it, but I struggled academically, I suppose. And when I found that you could make money, at that time I didn't have my qualification. I never ended up getting it, to be fair, but when I discovered that you could make money through hard work and being passionate about something, that I suppose that changed things. And from there I started trying to figure out how I could do more work and less schoolwork, less uni. So ended up leaving university and I suppose blagging my way onto a graduate scheme with a company called Michael Page, a big recruitment firm doing sales, which sort of ignited a passion for selling and conversation and how to talk to people in business. And then the motorsport side of things came a little bit later. But I started out in sales in recruitment, more out of just finding something to get my teeth into that I could earn some money, rather than a passion for that industry.
And the motorsport kind of came after that. How?
Well, I'd always had an interest in motorsport. I wouldn't say it was a huge passion at this point, but when I was working for Michael Page, a family friend who I played cricket with, a guy called Jonathan Badansky, who at the time was quite a big player in sports sponsorship, mostly around Formula One. He offered me a 3-month internship at the company, which at the time was called Badansky Sponsorship Limited and later became BSL World. And so I took him up on it and thought, I'm much more interested in sport than I am recruitment. So went to work for him for 3 months. 3 months turned into 6. 6 turned into a year. And during the first few years, maybe 2 or 3 years, I was working in Formula One, which sort of started the interest in motorsport. And we were working with Panasonic, who were the title sponsor of the Toyota F1 team at the time. And sort of worked my way up through the ranks there, and went on to work with ING Bank and the Renault Formula One team in the days of Piquet Jr. and Fernando Alonso in his World Championship winning years. And I think by the time I left, I'd done various bits and pieces with different brands in motorsport and other sports like golf, a little bit in athletics. And I'd become a director of that company relatively quickly, and worked there until 2012 with secondments in the Middle East at Yas Marina Circuit, and various other bits and pieces. But I suppose that, which would have been when I started there, 2005, that was when my sort of interest in motorsport cropped up and the passion started. But it was very much on a business perspective rather than necessarily the sporting side of racing.
So a couple of questions about that. First, kind of going back a bit more towards the beginning where you touched upon struggling with school. So what subjects was it that you found quite difficult?
Maths specifically. I'm hopeless at maths, and I've never been. I was diagnosed with dyslexia quite early, which was rare for that time when I was growing up. Dyslexia still wasn't really a thing.
How old were you when you got diagnosed?
I can't remember. I was pretty. It was at prep school, so I was probably 7 or 8 or something like that, and I had specialist lessons by a lady called Mrs. Stathers, who really, really helped. But numbers was my real nemesis, and I, even to this day, I'm hopeless. Like if I try and work out numbers in my head, everything goes blank, everything gets jumbled up. I just can't do it. Thank God for Excel and calculators, but that was where I really struggled. Anything mathematical. English was okay, but I mean, I didn't excel at anything at school outside of PE, and I was all right at art. But I struggled with all of it. I got very few GCSEs, didn't do well at school from an academic perspective at all. I struggled with everything.
And so what subject did you choose to study in uni?
At uni, I chose business with hospitality management. And, the hospitality side was... It was something I had a small interest in, I suppose, but it was more, I had to take what I could get because, being a product of an academic system that I didn't really get on with, I didn't have good results. So I couldn't be too picky about where I went or what I studied. So, I took business and hospitality management, and it was fine. Like I say, I didn't end up getting anything great out of it. I can see the value in it for people going into certain industries and so on. But for me, the big turning point was doing that industry year and discovering that I actually enjoyed working and enjoyed earning money. I immediately knew then that I wanted to work. I didn't want to do education anymore, and I wanted to work for myself. And try and create business opportunities for myself. And the education I got through working with Jonathan at BSL was amazing. And that led me up to 2012 when I decided now's the time to leave working for somebody else and start up on my own.
Well, it's quite interesting. A lot of what you say resonates quite a lot with me, because I don't know if when we met, I told you I had dyspraxia, which is...
Yes.
Yeah, so that's sort of a motor coordination delay, but I struggled severely with maths and physics and chemistry, and particularly like the sciencey subjects. But I only found out quite much later on, like 15. So I guess since then it's been trying to figure out, how to kind of channel some of that and how to kind of navigate around that. But I'd just be interested to know a little bit about, do you still work on these things? I mean, what helps you kind of navigate some of this stuff?
I do. I mean, the math side of things, I have to work on because I find it so difficult. Like you, it's almost not a case of trying to relearn it or anything like that, because it's just not in me. I just can't do it. Even basics, it astounds my wife when we go through our budgets at home, and she starts saying numbers to me and I just switch off. It's not, and I can really focus. I can concentrate on everything she's saying, and it doesn't even go in. It goes in, but it jumbles up. So it's acknowledging that I've got that issue and finding the best way to deal with it. And the best way I can deal with it is Excel, because I've made myself as good as I can possibly be using computer software that's going to support me. And then, fortunately, through the likes of Excel, you don't necessarily need to be a mathematician to get numbers to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm very grateful for things like percentage calculator online and all of these tools, which are very useful. But I think, particularly a lot of people sort of come, because I did this TED talk, and a lot of people kind of reached out, particularly like mothers and children who kind of, they've been diagnosed now, but they just don't know how to manage the energy sometimes, because some of the side effects then, I guess, are like anxiety, and like particularly when you're in school, such a pressurized environment. And now it's quite heartbreaking for children, obviously, with what's going on with school. But yeah, so you talked about then, being quite interested in the business aspect of Formula One. So it is fascinating from a business perspective. Just tell me a little bit more about that, and what is there particular parts of the business that you really gravitate towards in Formula One?
I mean, I guess the sponsorship side of things, just because it became my my day job. So, right through the my sort of educational days of 2005 to 2012 with BSL and working with big brands like ING Bank and Panasonic and TDK and HSBC and so on. It became that side of brand marketing became interesting to me. And in those days, sponsorship was still pretty much, I mean, it'd been around for many years, obviously, but it was still in its infancy and very traditional in the way motorsport activated its sponsorships. It's been interesting for me just to see the journey of old school sponsorships, like ING Bank came in with a 3-year plan, whack a massive logo on the car, do as much awareness as possible, big awareness play, make a huge splash year 1, consolidate year 2, exit year 3. And it's exactly what they did. And their brand recognition went through the roof. That doesn't really happen anymore. It's much more about storytelling and, engaging with an audience rather than just splashing a logo everywhere. But it's definitely that side of sport, and particularly motorsport, that I enjoy is the brand side and how and why brands get involved with platforms like motorsport.
I mean, yeah, the sponsorship landscape has changed massively since the early days. There is a lot more, I think, brands have to do when they do become a sponsor, or even the team, they have to do. Maybe give us an example of a very difficult sponsorship deal that, you managed to kind of turn around and get for a team.
I mean, there's been several, and I've brokered various deals over the years. I mean, in more recent history, I've done a lot of consulting with a sports marketing consultancy called Right Formula in London. And, with them, we've worked with many brands like we've worked with Epsom and Hilton and the likes of those that sponsor in Formula One. And they all have their different challenges and different requirements and different objectives. Some people like Epsom, for example, might do it for showcasing their products and introducing their products to their network of distributors, and that's the road they want to go down. Or it might be that they want to do a very consumer-facing point of sale promotion, utilizing assets that they've got, whether it's personal appearances and so on. Whereas a brand like Hilton might be more interested in awareness of its Hilton Honors campaign and how can they attract new members to the Hilton Honors campaign and give those members amazing experiences through the assets that they get in Formula One, for example. And we did some really cool, fun events with the likes of Hilton in all sorts of locations, leveraging some of the assets that we got from McLaren, often hospitality, which is still a major focus for brands. There's brands I work with even now who their main focus is hospitality, even though it's I suppose quite a traditional form of sponsorship. It's an important part of it, and particularly if you're a B2B brand, getting a group of customers or prospects in a room trackside, giving them an amazing experience is still hugely important. But obviously of late, with all the things that are going on around the world with COVID-19, everybody's had to change tack a little bit and forget the hospitality side of things and get even more creative and start thinking digitally and how they can use their assets to a digital audience and move away from physical activations. But it's an ever-changing landscape, and it'll be interesting to see when things go back to normality, what brands do and what they take from this downtime in the industry to take forward as learnings that they can develop when racing gets back on track and away from all the esports and virtual racing that seems to have taken its place temporarily.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask you about your thoughts on sponsorship in the COVID landscape and beyond. Obviously a lot has changed. So have you felt like a lot of brands are now like just not willing to sponsor anymore? I mean, it was already quite an expensive sport to sponsor in itself. Have you noticed a cutback?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, there are brands out there that are either, I mean, on the whole, there are ways that you can perhaps defer payments or look at ways of using your assets differently. There's nothing to say that, if you can't do a physical driver appearance at a racetrack or at a venue, why you can't take that online. But, certainly there are some brands that want to try and either get some money back because they haven't used the rights that they've got to maximum effect, or move those rights to next year, or move the money that they could potentially save from this year because of the lack of assets, move some of that cash to next year. But there's not that many that I'm seeing who want to pull out altogether. Some might want to pause, but the general consensus is that what can we do during this downtime to keep things ticking over, that's fair contractually for both rights holder and sponsor, but keeps them in the public eye or whatever their objective is, and look to pick it up again next year if things return to normal next year. We don't really know what next year is going to look like in terms of hospitality and so on at races yet. So, and Formula E, which starts, season 7 will start this year. We don't know what position Formula E will be from an activation on track perspective, even towards the end of this year. So it's mixed, but I think if you're a good marketer, there are opportunities here. It's not all doom and gloom. And there are ways to use it in a positive fashion.
Well, I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, but do you have any tips for, like, we have a lot of race car drivers that that are in our sort of audience, and of course sponsorship is such a big thing for them. What any tips for for them to stand out a little bit, because aside from the hospitality side of things? And
I mean, it is difficult because there are so many drivers out there. I think if you can find some sort of niche that other drivers don't have, it helps. Some drivers have that niche through by default, and it could be it's probably not a popular thing to say, but if you're a female racing driver, it's a useful niche. Jamie Chadwick's done incredible things. The birth of the W Series has obviously helped, but having being a female racing driver is not, at the moment, is not the norm. So that offers something that many male racing drivers don't have. And anyone with a point of difference, even the likes of Charlie Martin, who's trying to be the first transgender racing driver to reach Le Mans, is doing tremendously well at the moment. She's created an amazing platform for herself to promote inclusion and diversity in motorsport and promote trans awareness within the sport, and that's been a useful asset for her, not just in terms of raising awareness of something she's passionate about, but it has other benefits which can relate to sponsorship. But if you don't have those sorts of assets at your disposal, then it's just finding a point of difference. But at the end of the day, it's you just got to work extremely hard. Finding sponsorship is a full-time job. You know, that's why there are sponsorship agents out there. And I was one for a number of years, you know, finding sponsorships, you know, linking rights holders with brands. And it is a full-time job, and you've got to have the commitment to it. You've got to have good collateral. You need to have, you know, really impressive presentations that stand out from the rest. You need to show value. You can't just scattergun approach. You know, every approach needs to be tailored and bespoke to whatever brand that you're talking to, and it has to be relevant to that brand. You know, there's no point advertising to a B2B brand and telling them that, you know, going after mass awareness in across social media towards, you know, consumer-facing products is the way to go. It's you need to study the brand that you're approaching and make sure that your offering to them adds value to that brand. But also, I think I still see so many young drivers and people trying to make their way through sponsorship, just doing the usual, I'll put your logo on my car, give you 10 hospitality passes to a race, I'll do a speech at your company headquarters, all that sort of stuff, which has been done to death. And they need to find more creative ways to, sorry about the pinging, my email's going mad, to sell themselves. And there are so many different creative ways that you can do it, but you have to think out of the box and see what your assets are. What can you offer a business, whether it's a local company that wants to just target local people, or if it's a huge multinational global organization, you know, what are the objectives of that business? What are their KPIs, and how can you slot into their marketing plan?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Differentiation is 100% key. It is a good time for women in motorsport, absolutely, but it's been a long time coming. So,
Yeah, sure.
you know, I definitely agree. What are your thoughts a little bit on the recent stuff at Williams?
First of all, I think it's really sad because Williams are such an important part of Formula One, and it's a huge shame. I mean, it's not entirely a surprise. The Rocket partnership, it would be interesting to know what actually happened there. You know, they seem to leave very abruptly. But I don't know. I mean, I think they've done the right thing, you know, putting it up for sale or investment. I just hope it can get saved by someone that cares for it, and can return it to its former glory. But I think the mobocracy will probably jump all over Claire, and you know, it'll be, you know, down to her leadership, but I'm sure that it's a lot more complicated than that, and there'll be many factors that have contributed to their relative demise over the last few years, and it has been a few years. You know, they've not been strong for a while, but it's hugely sad. So I just hope that they find someone who can invest in them and bring them back to their former glory, because they're certainly needed in Formula One, and nobody would want to see them go. So yeah, it's a big shame.
Yeah, no, it is a shame, and I do hope that whoever takes it on does at least keep the Williams name. I think that would be a real shame.
Oh, they'll have to, surely. Yeah.
But yeah, that was quite shocking to see that happen just literally overnight. But yeah, so another question I'd like to ask you is, I mean, you've obviously built up your career, you've been quite successful, you run your own things now, and I know you set up Motormouth as well. But you know, do you still face any hurdles, and how do you kind of overcome some of those things without maybe the COVID stuff obviously being a huge thing?
Yeah. I mean, there's always hurdles to new business. I mean, from a Motormouth perspective, we started it in, I guess, really started focusing on it last year, 2019. And the challenge with Motormouth for me is it's not a profit-making organization at the moment. It will be, hopefully, one day. But at the moment, it's something that we've got to build up an audience for and monetize it and turn it into a profitable business. But there's been many hurdles in this sort of startup journey. And while I've started a company before in Silvey Sports and a company called EDMC before that, they were slightly different. They were sort of service companies. So Silvey Sports is basically just a consultancy business for me to pimp myself out to brands and agencies and consultancies to consult through a vehicle, just a limited company. And we've done projects through Silvey Sports, like at the London Olympics, where we went to 50 staff for about a year, all on a contract basis. And then we shrunk back down to me after the end of the Olympics, and then grew again at the next event, and so on and so forth. But it's a service offering. So it's easier to start that kind of business as long as you've got some sort of expertise. So that's all been relatively smooth sailing. But Motormouth was a different proposition, something I'd never done before, starting a business, finding co-founders of relevant experience, and trying to build a brand with zero startup cash. I mean, literally nothing. So we had to find ways to create a logo, create a website, build an MVP, build an app, get a name out there, whilst competing against huge other organizations. And then find some cash to continue it and keep it going. So, joining the investment bandwagon and trying to find people who would invest in our vision and help fund the company in the early days, so that we can create a roadmap for the future. And finding investments, hugely challenging, as anyone will know that's done it. But we're pleased with progress. The app is up and running. It's available everywhere. The website's up and running. We've got plenty of content on there. We've done video content, and we've obviously got the podcast, which has been a bit of a surprise success. It's been tough. I guess the biggest challenge is probably the money side, and just keeping that money going for as long as possible, and getting the investment, which we've done. And we're going into a round 2 of investment now. Not the best time to be doing it, but in the middle of, towards the end of last year with Brexit, and then straight into coronavirus. So that's been challenging, but it's heading in a really positive direction. So there's a lot that I've learned, and I think you don't go through this startup journey without hitting hurdles every day that you have to try and navigate.
Absolutely. So a couple of questions about the startup journey, but I guess the first question would be, what was the inspiration behind Motormouth? Why did you want to start this? And are you still doing your consulting and other stuff on the side? Or is this... Yeah,
so I am still consulting, and I consult between 3 to 5 days a week. The Motormouth stuff happens very early in the morning, which is fine because my kids wake me up at 5 a.m. and it happens very late at night after they go to bed. So, and often weekends, but it's a challenge to juggle it all. But I wouldn't have it any other way. And it's been great. I mean, the whole Motormouth thing was started. The original idea was back in about 2017. And it was born out of the fact that I go to a lot of motorsport conferences, like the Black Book Forum, and various others, very autosport bits and pieces and so on, and sports business. And the one thing at that time, anyway, in 2017-ish, was there was nowhere to go to really dive into your motorsport world in an engaging way. You had Autosport, fine, and Motorsport and those guys do a brilliant job with their publishing and so on, but there was not really a community, and it was still a very closed industry. Formula One drivers and so on are still hidden behind helmets. Social media, even just a few years ago, isn't like it is now, and I as a fan wasn't getting access to all the content that I wanted to, and I didn't want to have to sift through Twitter or Facebook to reach that content. So we thought, let's create a platform that can bring the community together more, and create a voice in a different way, not in a sort of techie or very, like nerdy Formula One way. It's a very light-hearted look at motorsport. It's fresh. We don't claim to be experts in how aerodynamic grip works or what winglets you need on the end of a wing. we take a light-hearted view on it. So we try to carry that through our podcast, any video content that we do. It's a light-hearted take on motorsport, but with a serious element, and that it is our passion, and we want more people to be involved with it. So Motormouth was born, and we built a basic app and a website, and we did a podcast with a guy called who's number one? It was Calin O'Keefe, who at the time had just got a race seat with Fernando Alonso's team, FA Racing. He was our first podcast guest, which we did on a whim. We was like, should we have a podcast, help support the app, drum up some awareness, and that sort of grew from there. And we had Kelvin Fletcher in episode 2, who's British GT champion, but also Strictly Come Dancing winner. Not many people knew he was a racing driver outside of a paddock, so that was quite fun. And then it's grown from there. And since then, we've had people like Coulthard, Crofty, Nicky Shields, Mark Priestley, Thierry Novell, who was released this morning actually, and various others. And we're up to episode 30 on the podcast. And just last week, we got inside the top 10 on Apple for our category, which is really exciting, at number 4. So hopefully we can continue that. So it's grown a lot over the last couple of years. But like I say, it is a challenge when you're doing it on a shoestring. And while we've made money, we've got investors. We've got about 8 or 9 investors. It's still peanuts compared to what the big boys are playing with. So it's a longer roadmap for us, but it's all heading in a positive direction.
Very interesting. What you talked about finding a co-founder is quite a challenge. So how did you kind of did you tap into your internal network, or what was the route to then finding your co-founders?
I smashed LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I spend hours on it every day. So I know where my skill sets lie, and that's talking nonsense and I guess selling the vision of Motormouth. So I can talk about it until the cows come home, and I can talk around it and at people and try and sell the dream of it. But what I'm terrible at is technology, I suppose. Not in the sense of social media or anything like that. I understand how the social media landscape works, but what I don't understand is how you build an app or how you build a website, and not just a WordPress or a hybrid app. An actual app with code. So I knew I had to find a CTO who had that experience, and if a bug got thrown up, whether it was an API breaking or some other technical term that I wouldn't understand, he'd be able to go, I know how to fix that. So I started the search, and I found a few people, but then the challenge was to find people that bought into the idea of Motormouth and had a passion for motorsport and technology, had the right skill set, and would also work for free. So I found a guy, Frank, and we chatted. We had several drinks, and we decided that we could work together. He wanted to charge me a very expensive day rate to start with, and I convinced him to do his work for nothing. So he has an equity in the company, as I do. We don't pay ourselves, and he's been on the journey for over a year, and he takes care of everything on the technology side. And he's an absolute genius when it comes to apps, websites, technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, everything. So that's been really useful. So he was a great find. And then we've had other people join along the way. Harry, who presents the podcast with me, I think, again, we were probably through LinkedIn, I would have thought. And he was one of the first people I spoke to about joining me on the podcast. And we clicked straight away and have a good rapport. So just got lucky with him. And he has a different take on everything. He's a lot younger than me. He's 22, even though he looks a lot older. He's hairy, beardy. So he and I do lots of video and podcasting together. So that was lucky. And then we also found, again, actually I think not through LinkedIn, probably a mutual introduction, a guy called Dan Modab, who is also a shareholder, who runs an agency called Be Wonderful, which is a marketing agency. And we partnered with them to do all our marketing. So we've got some really good people around us. Very fortunate that they work for nothing, which I suppose is all part of that startup life.
So I'd like to ask you, what footprint do you want to leave on this earth? What do you want to be known for as Tim?
Ooh, tough question. I guess I mean, I have sort of two lives really. One is the consultancy, and one is Motormouth, which has really become a passion. I mean, I guess from a consultancy perspective, I want to make sure that I do good by the brands that I'm working for, but equally for the teams that we get involved with, and you know, it needs to be give and take, and I'd like to be known as a marketer in motorsport and sport, I guess, but mainly motorsport, and one that has the best interests of the brand and team at heart, and hopefully has a degree of expertise in, and I've been doing it for 15 years or so now, and hopefully I've become decent at it. So I'd like to think that you know, that is an area that people would think I was okay at. I guess on the Motormouth front, you know, it's because it's a bigger thing. I guess it's easier to see where I'd like that to go and what mark I would like it to leave. And it's bigger than just me. You know, there's other people involved, and it's become a thing that, you know, people follow. And I'd like to think that in years to come, however many years it takes, that becomes a global platform that allows people to build a community online through, whether it's the app or you know, following the content there, or the website, or listening to the podcast. But we build a community of followers that looks forward to our updates and can engage with other fans and teams and drivers, and that it becomes, you know, a big thing. And you know, that's what we want to have Motormouth. We just want people to have a platform where they can have a community that they can call on for whatever purpose it serves them for, and create a long-lasting, profitable business that we can be proud of.
Well, I wish you all the best with that mission.
Thank you.
The last couple of questions from me. So, you know, it's interesting because, yeah, you didn't enjoy school and all that stuff, but you've obviously gone on to become quite successful. And do you feel like surrounding yourself by really inspiring people, particularly athletes who have a sort of different mindset, has kind of had an impact on you? And if so, like, how's that? What kind of avenues is that?
Yeah, I think athletes and businessmen. I mean, I spent a lot of time with racing drivers. I managed racing drivers for about 6 years, and worked with various people from Formula One down to more grassroots categories. And yeah, they're definitely inspiring in their own ways. I mean, they're a funny old bunch. With the podcast, we're talking to more and more racing drivers, and it's become, I mean, it's very clear that the guys that I used to manage and the ones that we interview now, the one thing that stands out in their careers is their single-mindedness. You know, when you ask them what would you be doing, or, you know, if you're not a racing driver, what would you be doing? And they all say, I have no idea, because there was never anything else. You know, all of them have said it's racing or nothing, and that is all I wanted to do from the moment I can remember about anything that I wanted to do in the future. It was just racing. So it's quite inspiring to hear their stories of single-mindedness, and I wish I'd had that vision when I was young. Even, you know, into my 20s, I was clueless, and I wish I'd had that vision to be able to be so single-minded about what I wanted to achieve, so that, you know, I could fast track myself into that place. And, you know, working with business people from various organizations is always inspiring. I mean, you know, I do a lot of work, like I say, with Right Formula, and Robin Fennick and the senior leadership team there are fantastic. And Robin is really becoming a leader in the paddock and other sports now through the stuff that he's doing in over at Right Formula. And, you know, working with the likes of them is fantastic. And the people that we get to meet through the consultancy is interesting. And, you know, you end up working with very senior people at race teams and different brands and organizations, you know, CMOs, COOs, and so on. And you can take a piece of knowledge or advice from all sorts of different places. And it's I'm inspired daily, but even by the, you know, the people who are still on their journey, like Harry, who does the podcast with me, you know, at 22 years old, talking of single-mindedness. You know, he's unbelievable. He knows way more about motorsport than I do. And, you know, his drive to succeed is huge. And you know, the fact that he's doing what he's doing, you know, he's a radio presenter, he's a DJ, he's a podcaster, interviewer, and, you know, I learned from him. So I think you can pick up inspiration and knowledge from all sorts of different areas, no matter, you know, whether it's someone right at the bottom or someone right at the top.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100% agree. It's just, yeah, I think everything has to happen in its time that it's meant to, you know. So like sometimes even if it took longer to get to the point of where you're meant to be, it's the journey along that has all probably had the dots all aligned for whatever reasons. Last question then really is, you talked about women in motorsport. So you've obviously been in the industry for a while. So I'd just like to ask you, you know, yes, it's a good time for sponsorship. Is it really? Do you feel like brands are really putting the money in supporting that talent and developing it? And secondly, you know, how long do you think it really is going to be before we see someone like Jamie or Tatiana get that seat as a driver?
So I'll take the second part of that first. I think it'll be a while. I think W Series is amazing, and we interviewed Catherine Bonmuir, the founder of it, beginning of this year. And her vision to create the series was amazing. I think the reason I think it'll be a while is because it's so early in its life cycle. So, you know, their vision is to create more female drivers, more inclusion, more bums on seats, and then hopefully by having more females in the sport, there's more chance that one of them is going to push through and into Formula One and become world champion, or, you know, whatever it might be. But it's so early in the life cycle. So Jamie, it may be too early for Jamie in that life cycle to get to Formula One. You know, I can't remember how old she is, early 20s, but, you know, is it too early? She's got to clock up a lot of super license points, which W Series does give you now. But it's probably too early. I think maybe if we look at W Series in 5 or 10 years' time, when there's been more females through it and participation has increased, and the future Formula One world champion female racer is probably, you know, looking up to people like Jamie right now, and might be starting out in their karting career, or may not have even thought about racing yet, but has started watching the W Series and seeing the impact it's had. So my view on it is that it'll be a while. But there's no reason why it couldn't come. And if we continue increasing participation in female motorsport, then hopefully someone will come through and race in Formula One. But like I say, I don't think it's going to be imminent. Although Jamie is working with Williams, I believe she's still working with Williams. So, you know, whether we'll see her in a test capacity on a, you know, Thursday or Friday or something, perhaps. But yeah, I think a full-time F1 seat is quite a long way away, but we're heading in the right direction.
Did you quantify that, like the next 5, 10, or?
I don't know. I mean, I reckon you're probably looking at, I mean, I don't think it'll be within the next 5 to 10 years, in all honesty. I don't know. I'd love to be proved wrong. I just think I feel like there is a life cycle that it needs to go through, and we've started that, and we're only just touching it. And you know, the girls that are in it now are all quick, but at the moment, are they quick enough to jump into an F1 car? Don't know. And that's not a slight on them or anything. It's just, I don't think that participation in female motorsport has been going on long enough to allow it. But like I say, those young girls that are watching the current crop get that awareness. I think those are the ones that will push through, you know, maybe in 10 years' time, who will have the opportunity. But having said that, there are some great drivers out there. I mean, Abby, Jamie, Alice Powell, who's raced in IndyCar, you know, they're top races. So I hope I'm proved wrong, but I think it is just a little bit early.
Yeah, I mean, it will depend how quick they can catch up to the life cycle, as you say, of what the current level, what the current benchmark is, I suppose, to drive an F1 car. But
yeah,
you know, some of these guys have been in F2, so you'd think then that the next progression should surely be that if they've been able to get up to F2, then they are sort of on a somewhat equal playing field.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it'd be great to see. It'd be great for the sport. I'd love to see, you know, a female driver in Formula One. and I hope it is sooner rather than later. But it's got to be justified, you know. And it shouldn't just be because they're a girl. You know, that's not what anybody wants, including the girls that are involved in W Series. You know, they want to be there on merit, you know, hopefully we see it soon. But like I say, I think it just needs to go through a life cycle, and let's see where it is in 5 years, and hopefully, you know, like I say, there's a young kid out there who's watching Jamie perform so well now, and will grow up aspiring to be like her, which so many kids are. I mean, I went to Brands to watch one of the W Series races, and Jamie was like a celebrity. Well, she is a celebrity, but she was like, you know, it was like Lewis Hamilton had arrived. You know, all the young kids wanted to talk to her. They had their little racing overalls on, these little 5-year-olds getting her autograph. So it's doing the job that it was intended to do. It's definitely increasing interest and participation in female motorsport, which is exactly why it's there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, if we look back at sort of our times, it was like Susie Wolff and very others. You know, having Claire obviously on the business side of things is interesting, but as a driver, it's just one or two, and there wasn't much access to those guys. So I think what Susie's done has been phenomenal, actually, with just opening it up in a different way, and I guess planting that seed from a very young age, and that's obviously now those kids do have so much more.
Absolutely, she's been amazing, and she's obviously now doing incredible things in Formula E as the boss over at Venturi. So, you know, Susie has been a massive ambassador for female motorsport, and you know, she's the one that I remember. You know, that you think, okay, women will get into Formula One, but like you say, there's been relatively few. So with so few, you know, what are the chances of finding someone that is going to go through and get into Formula One? It is so slim. So that's why W Series is so important. Let's get more women in the sport, and then one of them will come through. It's just a matter of time.
I think I read a crazy statistic, like today, 2020, only 8% of karters are female. So I think that
8%.
8%, yes. I think that gives a light on, you know, when you only got 20 seats for Formula One.
Exactly.
You know, it really, it's a tough one. But anyway, we can only keep kind of spreading the mission, keep talking about it, getting people's perspectives, and just championing it. And I think what Catherine's done has been really, really good for getting that exposure and all that stuff. So she's come in on it a great way. But anything else you'd like to share for us, or what's next for you?
I mean, I guess what's next for me is it's going to be on the Motormouth front. Is just continue doing what we're doing, bashing out podcasts, increasing our footprint, pushing people to the app, and increasing what we're offering. You know, we've got loads of ideas that we're going to roll out through the platform, not just on the podcast, but across the website and the app as well. So there's tons of exciting plans we've got on Motormouth. And the podcast, we obviously want to get to number 1 in our category, and continue. Say again?
What's the category?
We're in sports news. So, like I say, we got to number 4 in sports news last week, and we want to get higher, and then we'll probably switch across to the sports category, which is where the real big players are. You know, like the Peter Crouch podcast is smashing it, usually at number 1 in that category. But you know, the caliber, we've been really fortunate to get an amazing caliber of guests on the podcast. So Touchwood, that will continue to happen. And with those caliber of guests comes a natural following. So I'm excited to see where the podcast will go. And then on the other side of things, I'll just continue on the consultancy stuff, because that's, you know, where my passion is sponsorship. So we'll continue working with brands, working with agencies and consultancies to keep the sports sponsorship world ticking over, and coming up with creative ways to engage with brands and make sure that they're extracting all the value that they can, whatever their objective, through sport. So really, it's just on with the status quo, and Touchwood, we continue to grow Motormouth into a bit of a beast that can take on the big boys.
Absolutely. Well, we'll definitely be sharing those links to Motormouth when this gets published. And
thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tim, for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure just catching up and hearing a bit more about what you do.
Welcome. Enjoyed it.
What I found insightful about Tim's story is that he didn't have it all figured out by the time he went to university. And I think that resonates with a lot of people, and particularly at this moment when education has been so disrupted because of the pandemic. I think that if students can find a way to be part of a working environment, and that's not going to be easy, but if they can, get those opportunities and hunt for them, they'll probably learn a lot more from actually doing them by observing. And also another aspect that really resonated a lot with me was that, similar to me, Tim overcame many learning obstacles as a result of dyslexia, but he still found his own unique ways to be a part of the motorsports landscape and innovate in that landscape. And sometimes you can't help the hand that you're dealt with in life, and learning difficulties affect around 10% of the world's population. But I don't ever think that we should view those as weaknesses or barriers to any industry, and instead more as a performance gap that can be navigated around or worked hard on, and actually something that in some ways can play to your advantage, because you do look at the world in a different way and you come up with your own unique and innovative ways to actually process in those environments, and sometimes that can actually play to your strength. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you're leaving with some great inspiration that can help you with whatever you want to achieve in your life. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you can be notified when a new episode is posted. It would also mean the world to us if you could rate and review the show and share it with your friends so we can reach as many people as possible. If you want to reach out to me as well, you can get in touch directly at dj.n1nja on Instagram and Twitter. That's dj.n1nja, and also at Mission Makers on social media. Thanks so much again for listening. Until next time, Mission Makers, stay safe and have an amazing week.